In today's video, I am taking low-key, moody, one-light portraits using the Canon EOS R6. Let's start by taking a look at the shots we're going to get. So today I'm in the studio and it's all about those one light moody portraits. I really love the one light look because it is so moody, it's brooding, it's emotional, but it's also one of the simplest lighting setups you can do for portraits because, well, you've only got to balance one light rather than say 5 or 10. But because it's so simple, it's really quick to set up, and that makes it a great technique to practice if you want to start upping your portrait game by adding in lights. My subject is myself, because I'm still in Edinburgh in basically lockdown and I don't know anyone to turn the camera onto, so I'm gonna have to step in instead. On the upside, that means I get to direct myself exactly as I want to and I'm not restricted on time, so I can just keep on shooting for as long as I want. The downside is, of course, is that, well, let's be honest, I am no model, so I really shouldn't be the one in front of the lens, so that's something we're just going to have to deal with. But the techniques and tips that I'm going to be talking about in this video will apply whether you are taking photos of someone else, be it just a friend, a family member, or a hired model, or if you're just trying to really up your selfie game to give your Tinder profile a little bit of a sexy boost. But let's start by taking a quick look through the equipment that we're going to be using. First up, the camera, and as I mentioned, I'm shooting this on the new Canon EOS R6. Now, this video is not a review of the EOS R6. I'm not going to be able to give you any kind of proper buying advice or indeed go into any kind of specs and performance of it. So if you're after a full review, this isn't the video for you. I've just got this in for testing at the moment for CNET, and I thought, while I've got it, let's give it a go. But crucially, it does have a couple of things which will really make all the difference if you're taking self-portraits. First of all, it's got a flippy up screen, which you can see here, which means that when I'm standing in front of the camera, I can actually see what I'm doing. Now, that is something that's pretty common on a lot of cameras, crucially isn't on the Canon 5D4, which is what I normally use. Other thing it's got is Wi-Fi, so I can connect my phone and use this as the trigger, so I don't need to be reaching out or using the 10-second timer button, which obviously would slow me right down. But the camera itself isn't important for this sort of thing. You can use pretty much any camera going, and in fact I have got some great shots in exactly the same lighting setup using my iPhone. The light is this Interfit LM8, I think it's called. It's a LED monolight, and that's much easier to use than a usual flash for a couple of reasons. The main reason, of course, is that it's always on. So rather than using a flash where it only goes off when you take an image, you can see all the time exactly how that light is falling on your subject. So as you move the light around or as your subject moves their face, you can see how the light changes across their features. I've got about a 2-foot octabox on this, and that's just to soften the light. Remember, the bigger the light source relative to the size of your subject, the softer that light is going to be. A small flash head like this one will give a hard light, but put it inside a big old umbrella for only a few pounds and you get a much bigger light source and therefore more beautiful, softer light. Okay, enough talk about equipment, let's get started. The process is actually pretty straightforward once I've got everything set up. I've got the 24 to 70mm lens on here, zoomed into I think probably about 60mm, because I want quite a narrow head and shoulders crop rather than full body, largely because I don't have much room in my studio to take full body portraits. But one of the issues is that, as you can see, I'm quite close to the light because I'm 6'2", I don't have high ceilings, and so I've got to sort of awkwardly squat, a bit like this, which may look a little bit weird in the video, but in the photos you will not be able to tell that I'm having to do this, or at least I hope not, because it looks weird. So once you or your model is in position, you can see exactly how that light is falling across them. Having just the one light means you get nice light across one side of the face, the other side falls into that shadow, which is exactly what we want. That's how you get those nice moody tones and that more dramatic look. I want to keep things pretty simple to start, so I'm just going to be doing a pretty classic square on view, maybe tilting my head slightly here because I want more of the light to be hitting my face. And as you can see, as I tilt my face upwards, I'm looking more into the light, and what that's doing is filling in some of the shadows underneath my eyes. If I was to move my head down, you can see that there are more deep shadows, my eyes are much less visible, and it just doesn't look quite as nice. So the process now is basically just to keep on shooting away. I'm going to be using my phone to hammer the trigger, taking loads of shots, and I'm going to be moving my face around. Not too much while I'm shooting, but move, shoot, just to make sure that there's no motion blur going on. But I want to try lots of different positions. I want to try different expressions on my face. And I'm going to be trying things like putting my hand up through my hair, looking at the camera, looking away from the camera, looking up in a different direction, looking up to the light. There's no limit to the number of shots I can get, and so there's no limit to the different styles that I can try. And the more I try, the more likely it is I'm going to get at least a couple of shots that I may even be quite happy with. So one of the things that I like to try is putting my hand up, going through my hair, and it's maybe a bit of a sort of a classic model-y pose, but it could look quite cool and certainly looks kind of in the moody theme that we're going for. The problem is that, as you might be able to tell, if I go and put my hand up here like this, then I start to cast a shadow over my own face, particularly over my eye, which is very much not what we want to do. So I need to be very careful about kind of where I'm putting my hand. If it goes right here, then I can see there's a shadow right across my eye, blocking out that light. But as I move it up and away, we start to allow that light to basically come through the gap in my arm, which is looking a lot better. Alternative is that we put the arm up on the other side so we're not blocking the light at all. So I've just taken about 300 photos because the more I take, the more likely I'm going to actually like at least one or two of them. At least that's the hope. But the biggest transformation really comes when you take the photos into Lightroom and Photoshop, and with just a few easy edits, you can really make something cool. So why don't we head over there now and check it out. Okay, so here we are over in Lightroom, and this is one of the shots that I've picked out. It's from quite early on, and it's a pretty classic setup. We've got the nice light coming in from one side, and we've got good shadow over here on the other. But it's a shot that I think that with just a few tweaks, we can really transform into something a lot more professional. So let's go over to the Develop module. Straight away, I'm just going to slightly up the exposure. I'm going to bring down those shadows a bit because we want it to be very moody. I am going to be working through this pretty quickly, so my apologies if it becomes a little difficult to keep up with, but we want it to be nice and quick. I want to draw the eye much more to my face in the middle. I don't like that there's all the light spill on my arm, so I'm going to bring in a graduated filter which is set to be very dark. I may even bring that down a little bit further, something like that. Already we're trying to draw the eye to the middle of the face where the light is, rather than having it spilling down there, which I think looks better. Okay, I'm looking a little bit too orange, I think. So what I'm going to do is go to the saturation tab and bring down that orange, bring down the saturation of the orange a little bit. Also going to up the brightness of the orange slightly just to help it pop out. What's the yellow doing? Okay, because yellow is mostly in my hand, so I can probably stand to bring that down just a little bit. Maybe bring the saturation down. There's probably going to be quite a bit in the reds as well. If we just flick that up and down, yeah, it's quite a lot of red around my eyes and in my lips, which we can correct a little more easily in Photoshop later. But I am just going to bring that down. Also going to go to the hue, and I'm going to change it from being quite a deep emeraldy red. I'm going to push it more into the oranges, not too much because my face looks weird, but just enough to stop it looking from being very red and hot, because I was under the lights, it was a little bit warm, and also I've just got slightly aged skin, so that's just helped balancing it out a little bit for now. But I think that's everything that I want to do in Lightroom. So I'm going to go right click, edit in Photoshop, edit a copy, and that's taken us straight over to Lightroom. Let's just hide this panel for now. First things first, duplicate that background so we're editing non-destructively, and I'm going to have a little zoom in, and the first thing I'm going to want to do is use the spot removal tool just to clear up any blemishes and things that I don't want. Now, there's obviously a big debate in any kind of fashion photography around how much photoshopping you should do. Now, I am a big believer in keeping things fairly natural, but it's really down to, I think, your personal preference if you're editing your own face. So for me, I tend to edit on the basis that if there is not a permanent thing there, then you can get rid of it. So for example, spots, zits, blemishes like that, stray hairs, things like that, no problem. Or if you're working with makeup and you've got too much makeup in one place and it's sort of built up, you can get rid of that. However, things like scars or beauty spots, you know, I've got a small mole on somewhere on my face. I can't even remember which side it's on now. I don't get rid of, because that's part of your face. It's part of your being, and I don't think you should get rid of those. But there's a debate to be had about authenticity and things like that, and I would never want to encourage anyone to get rid of anything that really takes away from their character, takes away from who they are. But for example, this up here, that's just I think the remnants of a spot or something. Oh dear, that's not done very well. So the way I'm doing this is just by clicking around, but sometimes, as you can see, Photoshop doesn't always do a perfect job. So instead, we're going to use a clone stamp tool, and we're just going to try and clone that away. That hasn't worked very well, so instead let's use the patch tool. We can draw around that area, and then just tell Photoshop to replace it with something like that. And hopefully that's just started to hide it from view. And if we look away, turn that off and on, yeah, we can see that that's got rid of that nicely. So I'm going to quickly go round. I'm probably going to speed up this section, and I'm just going to click away, mostly using the spot removal tool and maybe a little bit the patch tool as well. And I'm just going to speed it up just to get through this even quicker. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that as a quick cleanup. If we just turn it on and off, it may not seem like a huge difference, but it's just adding up to a slightly more polished looking image. Crucially though, I haven't taken out things like, you know, lines on the forehead, because surprise, surprise, foreheads have lines. I do want to kind of address the under eye area here, because I do have some bags going on anyway, and I haven't often you could help that in a shoot by using some concealer or anything, but you know, I'm 32 and I've got bags under my eyes. I'm not going to try and hide them completely, because that would be daft, but I do just want to try and soften them a little bit. The way I'm going to do that is by copying that layer again onto a third layer, and using the patch tool this time, I'm just going to draw around them like this, and then move it to a different area, something like that. Deselect, and you can see how easy it is to completely take away a lot of that darkness. The problem is that it's done it so well that it now looks pretty fake and unrealistic. If we just zoom out a little bit to say here, we can see that there's almost no bag at all, and there should be a bit. As I say, I do have them. We don't want to get rid of them fully, so by having it on a different layer, we can just bring that opacity back down, you know, and just sort of build it up from the bottom. And I think somewhere around, 60% I think is enough just to kind of take the edge off, but it's still there, which I think looks good. But there's a little more we can do with my skin generally, because we've got uneven tones. As I say, it was quite hot under the continuous light, so I was a little bit red in the face in areas. And one of the techniques we're going to use is called frequency separation. Now, this is a very high-end retouching tool. So I'm not going to go into huge amounts of detail, but basically you can create frequency separation manually, but it's very complicated and I don't even really know how to do it properly. So instead I am using a Photoshop action. If you just Google frequency separation Photoshop action, I'm sure there are plenty of free ones. I had a different one. I couldn't remember where I got it from, but I've got one from Flern, which I bought as part of my Pro package. Basically, all it means is that you click on the frequency separation, run the action in Photoshop. It does it. You blur it on one layer, and then you should be done. What it does, if you just have a look down here in the layers, is it separates the colors in your image from the textures in your image. So you can edit the colors without editing the texture, which is really, really important for being able to change the skin tones, but without making it look too airbrushed and fake. You still keep that skin texture. So for example, now what I'm going to do is click on the color layer, the low frequency, and using the lasso tool, I'm just going to select, say, this area of my skin. And now if I go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, I can increase the amount of blur. And as you may have seen before, if we were at 2.8 pixels and then we take it up to, let's say, 30, it's smoothing out all of those colors, because it is literally blurring the colors, but it isn't blurring the texture, so those lines are still there. And if we deselect that and just turn that whole frequency separation off and back on, you can see just how much it's smoothed out those skin tones, which is sort of what you may want to achieve through proper makeup, or if I just wasn't all hot and sweaty under a light. So it's a really, really good tool, but it does take a little bit of experimenting and a lot of trial and error and practice to get it right. But I'm going to keep on doing a little bit more. I'm going to try and do a section up here. Gaussian blur, deselect, take a look. There's this bit here, which we could do again. And you can go through pretty quickly, and I don't think you want to overdo it, because it starts to look a little bit fake, but I'm quite happy with this for now. Same down here. And if I was doing this commercially, then you'd want to take a lot more time over it to make sure that it's exactly how you want it to look. But I'm pretty happy in just blitzing through it for now. Let's take a look at the nose, because we've got a lot of different tones going on there. See, that time I don't think it's done a particularly good job. So I'm going to undo that. And instead what we're going to do is, still on that same low frequency layer, I'm going to take a sample of color, let's say that tone, and using the brush at a medium size but quite a low flow of around 2%, I'm just going to paint over, because we're still only painting on the color, so we're not losing texture, but we can just paint in a more even tone, resample at a higher point there, and just build up a more even skin tone on the nose from what we had before. So if we turn it off and back on, we've got a nicer looking tone, but it isn't that strong block of color that the blur tool had achieved. So if we just zoom out now, fit that back on screen, off and on, you can just see how much it's evened out those skin tones. Now, arguably, I think I have gone a little bit too far. It's looking I'm looking a little bit porcelain on my forehead, but crucially, as again, you can see that the lines are still there, the texture in my face is still there. You know, if we'd have taken that away, then it would look even more porcelain and weird, and we don't want that. But I also think I could do a little bit with the under eye here. It's looking a little bit purple. So if I take a sample of skin from, say, here, brush tool, slightly bigger size, I can just brush that in, changing that purple to more of a browny tone. off and on, and you can see that that has made quite a big difference there. In fact, I can maybe keep on doing a little bit more there. It's also just helping soften some of those shadows a little bit. So I think that's looking a lot better. This is now a much more commercial, polished looking image, and it's only been, how long has it been? I don't know, not very long, a few minutes. Okay, there's another nice tool that Flern has, and it's what they call Amazing Eyes. What it basically does is just help add a little bit more clarity, sharpness, color pop to your eyes, which I think could work quite well here. So, and again, it's another action that you just run. You could do this manually by using levels and clarity tools, and then just specifically putting it on the eye. But for quickness and speed, I'm just showing you how I would use these Photoshop actions, because if you've got actions available, then use them. They do save you a ton of processing time. With this one, what you do is you tell it, oh, I want it to go over the eye here. Now move the copied circle to the next eye. So there you go. And now it's over both eyes. And I say, go ahead, do your thing. I've got to add a blur to make it blend more naturally. It's done all kinds of things, and how much sharpening, standard. And so there we go. It's done that, and you know, it's blended in nicely with just the eye where I want it. It hasn't applied anywhere else in the face, but it is far too bright. So I am going to let's just close that group. Oh, and in fact, it has applied that within my frequency separation folder. Now, I don't think that will have made any difference. Let's just move it up. Oh, and indeed it has. It's sort of increased that contrast a little bit, which I actually think looks better, but it is far too overkill. So I'm going to bring that opacity down by quite a bit, just to maybe 30%. Just a subtle hint, but just enough to kind of give the eyes a little bit more pop. And so if we zoom back out, then we can see now the difference that has made to the eye. It's subtle, but it does just help that little bit. Now, looking up at my hair, we've got a lot of stray hairs going on. Now, it's really the sort of thing that you should get in camera. You should make sure that your hair is in the right place, but I'm no stylist. I didn't have a stylist with me, so I was just doing the best I could. What I'm going to try and do is use the patch tool. Sorry, ignore that first. Deselect. Let's do this on a fully new layer. So holding Command or Alt on layer and then merge visible. That's now merged everything we've done before onto a new layer, so we can keep on working. I'm just going to select this with the patch tool and then just move that patch over here. And it's done a decent job of getting rid of that. We've got some weird sort of blurring there, so let's just try and do that again. It's sort of done it. So let's actually instead use the clone stamp tool, take a sample from over here, and let's just try and brush that in a bit like that. Difficult to tell exactly how well I've done it because I've got a big bright light shining in my face, but that looks to be about fine. I don't think you would particularly notice. Let's turn that off and on. You can definitely tell that I've got rid of that and neatened the hair up, so I think we're looking good. At which point, what I'm going to do now is duplicate this layer, and so we've got another layer to be working from, and we're going to go to Filter and Camera Raw Filter. And what I'm going to be really relying on here is some of the presets that I've got to give some very different color toning effects. Now, with most of these shots, I imagined that I was going to be doing black and white, but I'm going to just have a quick look through the different color tones and see what sort of look we can get. I mean, I don't dislike this with adding in some of the blues to the shadows. Oh, I actually really like, okay, I like what this has done quite a lot. I like what it's done with the oranges in my face and with the blue in the background. So I'm just going to click that for now. And I'm going to have a look through some of the black and white ones as well. So B3 black and white I think really works. But do I like it as much as the color one? You know what? I don't think I do. I think I really like the color on this. So let's click OK. I might just bring the opacity down slightly because it's a little bit strong. I think somewhere around somewhere around that I think looks really nice. Yeah, okay. So let's just go back and have a quick look. I'm going to turn everything off and just have a look at our background layer. This is what we brought into Photoshop. It's pretty much straight out of camera. You can see clearly that I've got the bags under the eyes are more noticeable. The blemishes in my forehead is very noticeable, and we've smoothed a lot of that out. Yes, we have gone too far with the smoothing. It's given me a very porcelain look. I should have done that a little bit less, but good example to kind of show what you can do with your face. And I think it's done a lot to make this look like a much more polished image. The absolute last thing I want to do in Photoshop is a bit of dodging and burning. So that's selectively brightening or darkening certain areas. The way I like to do that is creating a new layer, going to edit, going to filling it with 50% gray, and great, we're done. We've got a lovely gray image. No, we're not done. We go to overlay as a blending mode. That's going to hide it, and that means if we get our brush tool and if we paint with black, let's just show that at a higher flow. Paint with black, it darkens the image. Paint with white, and it lightens the image. Now, if you do that with a much lower flow of, say, 1%, oh no, let's go 2%, then you can use it in a much more subtle way. So what I want to do is just try and accent some of the light which is falling on my hair here by painting white. I'm going to paint over my eye a little bit just to kind of increase the light on that, a little bit round on my lips, a little bit on my beard and moustache. But it was mostly around these bits of hair that I wanted to do it. I'm now going to swap my colors, paint with black, and I'm going to get a bigger brush size and just very gently brush in over this side of my face, because I do think it's a little bit too bright. I think darkening it down is just going to help reduce that porcelain look that I've done. So if we just turn that on and off, I think that's looking a lot better. It makes it look a lot more natural. I'm going to brush in on my hand a little bit because it is a little bright there still, and a little bit around my chin there. Okay, turn that off and on, and again it's quite a subtle change, but I do think that it's made a big difference in keeping those tones under control and adding a little bit more highlight to the hair. That's everything that I think I want to do in Photoshop. So I'm going to press Control S to save it. That's going to then allow us to go into Lightroom and see the image as we've done. Last thing though, in Lightroom, I'm going to get my brush tool, reset the effect, and just add in a bit of clarity, and I'm going to paint that around the hair, just like that, kind of where we were doing the dodging and burning before, a little bit in the beard, a little bit in the moustache, just a very small amount, just bring it down. Something like that. Yeah, I think that looks okay. And if we go before and after, you can just see it's added a tiny little bit of extra detail in the hair, just that little bit for pop, which looks good. Okay, so I think that's probably everything we want to do. So I'm just going to have a look. This was our image. This is it straight out of camera, no changes whatsoever, and we've just in a short space of time we have created this, and I think it looks so much better. It's a really polished image, but it's still got the skin texture, it's still got that mood, and I think it really fits with the one light theme that we were going for. I really hope that that's been helpful to see how I would do the sorts of edits to get this sort of image. Sometimes doing portrait work can be very, very involved. I am not an expert at it at all. I can do it to a decent extent, but there are there are portrait retouchers who would do an incredible job over this and take a lot more time. But this is kind of how I know to do it, and I think I've done a decent job. I'm quite happy with the image, and there's not much more that I think I would want to do. If this has been helpful to see, please do let me know. Give your thoughts in the comments below. Also, of course, please do tap that like button if you have enjoyed the video, and if you don't subscribe already, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Firstly, it really helps me, but also we've got some really cool stuff coming up, more things like this in the studio, and going out on location doing more photo shoots. So plenty of cool stuff coming up, so hopefully that's something that would be of interest. So subscribe, stick along for the ride. But for now, we're all done, and I will see you next time.